So this afternoon I'll return once again to the theme of path, marga, which just by the way circumstances unfolded, beginning with Geshe Ngawang, who taught these 5 paths from the Abhisamalankara, the classic text, the definitive text, which I received from him back in 1973, I guess, a long time ago. And looking at the first of the 5 paths, because that's, after all, if one is serious about reaching the paths and progressing along them, then the obvious one to really focus on is the first one. And within the first one, the obvious thing to do would be to look, if it has 3 stages, look at the first stage. If you actually achieve that one, then you might take a lot more interest in the second stage and the path of application and so forth. And so this is really what captivated my heart and mind early on, and why I left the monastery, which we're going to be, for 6 years, equally focusing on all the 5 paths and the 10 bhumis, right? And, if you're way up there, if you're like an Arya Bodhisattva, that would make really good sense, I think. But for me, it just didn't make any sense. So, brief summary of yesterday. Just because the excerpt from the Buddha's Great Discourse on the 4 close applications of mindfulness is so eminently practical, really. For ethics, as I highlighted yesterday, it's not that difficult. It's really practical. The interface with therapy it could be fantastic. Clinical psychological therapy. If you have a psychological problem, examine when is it present, whether it's a bipolar disorder, whether it's anxiety, whether it's symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, whatever it is, to help people cultivate the awareness. When is it present? It's not homogeneously present. It's not every single moment of the day, right? It comes in surges, waves, it lingers, but then it fades to some extent. So to be examining it, you start to empower yourself in the most wholesome sense of the term. Empower yourself. When does the mental affliction arise? When is it more absent? When is the mind more focused? When the mind more dull? When is the mind more agitated? When is the mind more lofty, noble, wholesome, sublime? When is it not so much? And so be really taking a keen interest in this. And then as one does so and kind of gets one's bearings on, well, how does this, it's like having like you're a biologist. I've got this species in front of me. I wanted to be a wildlife biologist for all my teens. I wanted to go out into nature and just observe wolves. I wanted to be a wolf man and observe wolves, and their behavior and photograph them and so forth and make sure that we can preserve them. It's quite an interesting species. But then you just examine them to see, how do they work? How do they work? And now we come back, the natural history of the mind, the empirical study of the mind. And then as we kind of take stock, we get a clear sense to what extent are unwholesome factors arising, what extent do they subside, to what extent are, very helpful factors arising. Then that other element, so immensely rich in such a short period, short presentation. Now examine when the mind does become either afflicted or unafflicted or wholesome, concentrated and so forth. What are the factors that gave rise to that? How did it happen? That's a really good question. And then after some time, maybe the mind's really wholesome and then it's not. Or the mind was very composed and then it's not. Then it's fallen into laxity or excitation. How did that happen? What are the factors of its dissolution? This is already, I think, just tremendous amount of material. But then Buddhist meditation, Buddhist in kind of modern Buddhism, Buddhism and modernity. Buddhism is very often presented as a kind of a religious, spiritual tradition where fundamentally it's all about me. I know one very good scholar, I'll leave him unnamed, but he's done outstanding scholarship, Buddhist scholar. He's done outstanding scholarship, really some very fine work by any criterion. And he was following Tibetan Buddhism, and then he just basically snapped, and he rejected it entirely. So as his professional skills, he has nothing else he can do. So professionally, as a scholar, he continues to teach Buddhism and teaching and so forth and so on, but it just snapped for him. And he reverted to Christianity, which I have no problems with, Roman Catholicism, but a really hardcore conservative kind of Roman Catholicism. No mystical aspect at all, just kind of like, Inquisition style. And that's where he continues. Maybe it's a little bit of an open state, but not much. Very conservative Roman Catholicism. And why did he snap? I've never met him, but very, obviously very intelligent man. And as I said, done very good scholarship. And his conclusion was why he just kind of rejected Buddhism altogether, and scoffs at it. He goes back and kicks dirt in its face, because it's just all about me. It's all about my mind, and I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to purify my mind, and I'm going to get my liberation, my. And then he looked at Christianity, and he said, but no, this is about the divine, this is the sacred, this is transcendence, this is Jesus' life, his teachings, his sacrifice, salvation. My, and then, screw that, So the man's not crazy. I don't agree with him, of course. But we see where you might draw that conclusion. And also, I know some of the teachers that he encountered, it was very intellectual, very analytical, very dry. And not much juice, and very little meditation. So then he just threw it all out. Lock, stock, and barrel. But he doesn't have any skills apart from teaching Buddhism, so then he continues to teach Buddhism. What can you do? It's called golden handcuffs. When people are trapped in a job they don't really want, but they have no other skills. So, but of course that was, when I saw that, I was sad. Not that he became a Christian, but that he so profoundly missed the point. For all of his knowledge, and he has really quite extraordinary degree of scholarly knowledge, but none of the juice. We don't even have to go to Mahayana. It's not like, that's because he saw Theravada and it's all selfish. That's not true. That's just not true. The four immeasurables, where's the selfish part of that one, But also even here, in this continuum of the four applications of mindfulness, the excerpt that I drew for you yesterday from the Satipatthana Sutta was, okay, you're looking at this, but you're just being sensible. It's like developing good psychological hygiene, recognizing when your mind is wholesome and not, and so forth, how it becomes so, how it gets over it, and so forth and so on. But then, something is virtually never taught. And then I'm kind of wondering, don't you people read? Don't you understand? It's right there, and it's not difficult. You attend internally. It makes really good sense, right? Know thyself. Know your own mind. Know your own feelings, your desires. Know that in a benevolent way, a loving way. Direct loving kindness to yourself. Don't be bashful. But he doesn't stop. This is the Buddha himself. He doesn't stop. Where does he go from there, Mary Kay? Attend to the mind internally and then? Externally. Suddenly everything this scholar said is wrong. Because we're attending to the minds, not with clairvoyance and voodoo and whatever. No, we're attending to people. I can know Amy's emotion a little bit right now because she's emoting. It shows up in her face, and I can see her teeth. And it's not because she's hungry. And we hear laughter. We know that that's not a cry for help. It's not an expression of boredom. And we know a lot about other people's minds. Without being clairvoyant. If you're clairvoyant, all the better, if you're benevolently motivated. But by attending closely to body language, to voice, what people say, facial expressions, and all of that, attend to the minds of others externally. And if you've really gotten to know your own, then you will know a lot about others, because human mind. Yeah, different in the details. Core, pretty much the same. Want to be happy, want to be free of suffering. I have mental afflictions, obscurations, don't like them. Same. And then if I can develop benevolence, kindness, patience, compassion towards myself, not towards my mental afflictions, screw them, nuke them, torpedo them, stab them, I don't care. Be ruthless, merciless. Kill them all. The mental afflictions, sure, become an arhat, kill them all. But towards yourself, the one who is burdened with mental afflictions, if one can actually, this is so deep, isn't it? So simple, but so deep. If you can develop a real kindness towards yourself, even when your mind is all bent out of shape, klishta, warped, bent, with frustration, anger, irritation, pomposity, jealousy, contempt, disgust, and so forth, all disfigured, like a lovely face that somebody goes and just twists it all out. Take the most beautiful face in the world, and then just, like that. Very quickly, it's not attractive anymore. Want me to do it again? Yeah. And I don't even have a beautiful face, but I can make mine uglier. I'm good at that. I mean, we all are. If that's for the face, so is it for the mind. A person can have a lovely mind and it gets twisted, it's ugly. It's ugly. But if we don't respond with self-disgust, self-contempt, self-loathing, and so forth and so on, when we see we ourselves, fall into or succumb to mental afflictions, if we feel, draw out the battle lines towards them, but be sympathetic towards ourselves, then when we see other people fall into mental afflictions, because nobody wakes up and adopts them consciously. Whether people are foolish, whether they're delusional, they're bigoted, they're obnoxious, they're arrogant, megalomaniac, manipulative, exploitative, and so forth. They didn't choose to have mental afflictions. And that's where all that's coming from. It's all derivative mental afflictions. And so if we can genuinely be sympathetic, empathetic, kind, encouraging towards ourselves with all of our mental afflictions, all our burdens, and be patient, that they're not going to go away overnight. They're not going to go away with a decade, probably. And in my case, not going to, I don't know, it's taken a long time. But not get discouraged, because after all, as my old friend told me, there's nothing else to do. Really. You want to give up on your mental afflictions? Okay, you win. And you're going to have a nice time now? You're going to enjoy yourself? You're going to let all the mental afflictions kind of just settle in? It's good. We won. The mental afflictions say, we just beat the crap out of you and you've given up. Exactly what is your strategy now? What's your path for happiness? As you carry all the burden of your mental afflictions with you. As you go to Tahiti, you go downhill skiing, you ride a fast car, you drink a lot, you watch a lot of movies. Exactly what's your strategy now? What's your path? I say that with such confidence because you're totally screwed. It's just, it's like playing chess and say, it's checkmate in two moves, but do whatever you like, it's fine by me. Because you're screwed. And if you can't see it yet, you'll see it soon. Internally, externally. And then, oh boy, internally and externally. And seeing all this whole dynamic, how we are always in interface, in interrelationship, mutually co-arising, You're seeing one face of me right now. This isn't the face of me that my wife always sees. Or my father has all seen. He's known me for 66 years. And so on. This is a face. It's arising here. There's nothing contrived. I can say this sincerely. I'm not trying to make an impression on anybody. I'm not trying to put on a show. There's no advantage in that. And so just this is what's coming up, right? But it's what's coming up in this situation, right? Where I'm meditating 9 hours a day, I'm practicing Dharma, you're getting the very best that I can offer. And I'm very glad for that. But the very best that I offer is that. You don't really want to see the very worst I have to offer. And certainly don't want to have to pay for it. So the interrelationship between, seeing the mind internally and externally, seeing how our own behavior influences the minds of others, and the minds of others by way of their expressions influence our own minds. Now everything that was the concern of that Buddhist scholar is now evaporated. Everything you just said is not true. Everything you said is not true. And this is transcendent, and it is a sacred path, and it is leading to transcendent, and it is divine. It's all of those things you thought weren't there just because you couldn't see it, which is a shame. I hope he found a good path that really serves him well, because it doesn't concern me that he became Christian, but it's unfortunate that he abandoned Buddhism for this way. It'd be like abandoning the Roman Catholic Church because some priests have really screwed up with children. That's true, it's terrible. Is that sufficient reason for abandoning the entire church? Well, for some people I guess it is. But, I don't think that is a sound evaluation of 2,000 years of a church. So there we are. But now, moving on. We can ask, what was the point of that, though? What was the point of that passage from the Four Applications of Mindfulness? And I will add this point, it's straight from the Pali Canon, and that is in order to achieve nirvana, to come to the culmination of the path as an arhat, and following the path of the Four Applications of Mindfulness. In fact, you don't have to have profound insight into all four of them. If you wish to, fine, there they are, each one laid out in its own matrix, and some common themes running throughout. But in fact, it's sufficient to gain profound insight into any one of them, and that will be sufficient to take you all the way to liberation. Quite interesting. Because the other ones will all come in its wake, right? And so each of these is simply an entrance to realizing the impermanent is impermanent, dukkha as dukkha, non-self as non-self. The mind gets purified, and it breaks through to the unconditioned, realizes nirvana. You fuse your experience of nirvana, your realization of nirvana with shamatha, and then you totally purify your mind, irreversibly, and you're done. That's it. And you have 4 doors. 4 doors. You can do that by way of the body, by feelings, mind, or phenomena. Any one of the 4. So I picked out the close application of mindfulness to the mind, just because that's, we're so much focused on the mind for this retreat. So there's that. But now, once again, what's the point of that matrix within the Pali Canon? To realize the 3 marks of existence. All phenomena, all conditioned phenomena are impermanent. All tainted phenomena, that is, conditioned by mental afflictions, are unsatisfying. And all phenomena are empty of self, are not self, and are empty of self. And there's the strategy by which to realize nirvana. Right? There's no reference there to realizing the emptiness of any other phenomena. Only self. There's just no reference to it. It's not there. You're simply attending to the skandhas as skandhas, but you're not exploring whether the skandhas are inherently existent or not. It's not there. We find just that kind of like yin-yang dot from Nagasena, and the analogy of the chariot. It's a dot, but you don't find that much in the Pali. It's a dot. And so it's there, and then that dot goes into full blossom in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the Diamond Cutter Sutra, the Heart Sutra, and so forth and so on. But now we come back. This is all about path. I'm not really actually meandering. This is all about path. So there's the path to becoming an arhat. But of course, we didn't come here to follow the Shravakayana path. This is about Mahamudra, which is totally embedded in the Mahayana. And so we come back to the theme, same 5 paths, but instead of it being the 5 Shravakayana paths, it's the 5 Bodhisattva paths, or Mahayana paths. Right. Now they both, the small stage of the Mahayana path of accumulation, right? It's still all about the 4 applications of mindfulness. And now, instead of simply being shamatha and renunciation, which is what you need for the Shravaka path, it's shamatha and bodhicitta, spontaneous, uncontrived, spontaneously flowing bodhicitta, uncontrived bodhicitta. You are bodhisattva. You've entered the path, right? But now how do you progress along that path? By the 4 applications of mindfulness. That's a small stage of the Mahayana path of accumulation. But now we know, from that comment made by Panchen Lozang yesterday, let's just imagine he's here, why not? Because he's the teacher. That when you remember what he said, I can't quote it, but you have it right there in the text, that when, while having investigated and identified Mahamudra, you mount it on the steed of shamatha, and you experience the pliancy, the suppleness, and the bliss of body and mind, then you achieve the warmth stage of the next path. Path of, let's say, for 40 years I was always calling it path of preparation. Is that what you heard, Kathy? I kind of like it better. I'm just so used to it. Because it is a path of preparation. It's preparing you for the path of seeing. But that point there is really critical. Is you enter that second path. It's very clearly stated. Anybody who really knows shamatha and knows the background information here, when he says your Vipashyana is mounted on shamatha, and there arises then on that basis, with that fusion of shamatha and Vipashyana, there arises the pliancy and the bliss of body and mind, then you know what he's talking about. Right? Don't do the Greek, Glenn. It can't be interpreted any other way. This is the exceptional pliancy and bliss that comes from the union of shamatha and Vipashyana into emptiness. There was a lower level, which is quite marvelous in and of itself, the pliancy and the bliss of just flat shamatha. You could be focusing on earth element or the sensations of your breath. But this is another whole order of magnitude. It's just another whole dimension, another whole operating system, if you like. So you've achieved that at the entry point of the Mahayana path of preparation. I'm going to call it that. 45 years of habit is pretty strong. And I like it, actually. And that was Shabara Rinpoche translated that way 45 years ago, or translated with Geshe Ngöntagye. So there we go, path of preparation. Well, if the entry there, the achievement of warmth, the first of 4 stages of the Mahayana path of preparation, if that's how you enter it, then you know by absolutely incontrovertible logic, you must have been meditating on that a lot before. Just like you don't achieve shamatha the first day you start watching your breath. It may take you a good deal of time. Well, likewise, you don't achieve the shamatha, you don't achieve the fusion of shamatha Vipashyana on emptiness the first time you try it. So this is what's being cultivated all the way along on the Mahayana path of accumulation. While you're enhancing your bodhicitta, you're developing your ethics and so forth, really overwhelmingly, you're focusing not only on the impermanence, the dukkha, the non-self of your aggregates, that they are devoid of an inherent person, and that's your foundation. It's really good, and it interfaces with psychology, but you're going beyond that, where kind of psychology doesn't follow. There's not the questions asked or really needed to be asked in psychology. If a person comes to you with a psychological problem, you probably won't say, well, you should probably meditate on the lack of inherent existence of your mother. It might work, but I wouldn't bet on it. You know? Why don't you just meditate on the emptiness of your own awareness? That'll do it. Yeah, sure. Probably not. But the type of teachings the Buddha gave yesterday, oh, absolutely yes, enormously relevant. And don't get all caught up in yourself. Attend internally, externally, and internally and externally. Gosh, just maybe your mental problems are related to the way you engage with other people. Stranger things have happened, you know. And so, but here, as we're on the Mahayana path, then we have that as our foundation. It's really an enormous key to psychological health and balance. Enormously helpful ethics, enormously helpful for your shamatha practice. But if the entry to the Mahayana path of preparation is there when you've achieved shamatha on emptiness, with a total fusion or unification of shamatha vipassana, then this casts the 4 applications of mindfulness in a new light. And it's one that hardly anybody teaches. And it's amazing because it's so magnificent. And it's the 4 applications of mindfulness embedded within the Madhyamaka view, within the Mahayana. But the Madhyamaka view, not simply, all conditioned phenomena are impermanent and so forth, but looking at the lack of inherent nature of the body, the lack of inherent nature of feelings, of the mind, of phenomena, and really gaining profound insight there. Almost nobody teaches it, and yet, gosh, there it is. That's the first thing you do when you've entered the Mahayana path of accumulation, right? So, I'm so glad I left the monastery when I did. I came back, I got more training in that later when in Switzerland, but I got out when the getting was good. And so, I've translated something, and I taught it, as I recall, in the second 8-week retreat in 2012. We had an 8-week retreat was all about the 4 applications of mindfulness. I think that was the time. We spent the first month on the Theravada approach and the second month on the Mahayana approach. And for that retreat, I translated a magnificent chapter from Shantideva, which the earlier translation done like 60 years ago is not very revealing. I mean, it's really hard to make any sense of it, unless you already know what it means. And this is from chapter 13 of the Shikta Samachaya, the Compendium of Practices by Shantideva, his other great text, which really desperately needs to be retranslated. And I think somebody told me it is being translated by somebody who's good. Who knows how long it'll take. But I translated just the 13th chapter. And it's Shantideva's presentation, based on one sutra citation after another, about as definitive as it gets, of the 4 applications of mindfulness within the Mahayana context, focusing on emptiness. And I've just shared that with all of you, the translation. I think it's really quite good. And I work with my wife, who's an outstanding Sanskritist. We worked again from the Sanskrit and the Tibetan. And so there it is. It's one chapter. I think it's really, to my mind, maybe the most splendid chapter in the whole book. And so out of that, as I did with the Satipatthana Sutta, I didn't read all of it yesterday, I excerpted here on the notes here, and on the notes for today, just the section on the close application of mindfulness of the mind. Okay? But the whole chapter, body, feelings, mind, and phenomena, I've already sent it off to Claudio and Sange, so then you can download the whole thing if you like and see the larger context. So here it is. So what I'd like you to do now, I'd invite you to do, is just sit quietly, because this is going to be the front loading of the next meditation that we'll do in silence, as we did yesterday, with the foundational approach from the Pali Canon, and now we go to the first floor, based on that, from the Mahayana Sutras. And one does find discussions of this by Asanga, by Shantideva, of course. You find it in the sutras, but you really need to know where to look. And the Tibetans just haven't worked with this material. I think this is one really splendid example of the wisdom of His Holiness's counsel. Hey, you Westerners, don't just get your Buddhism from Tibetan sources, because those were by and large created by Tibetans for Tibetans. And there'll be a lot of common ground, but go back to the sources we drew from. And that's what I've done here. So what I invite you to do now is just listen contemplatively, and you'll find a lot that is familiar. But this is Shantideva's pith instructions on the close application of mindfulness to the mind. I'll read it. There may be a bit of commentary, maybe not, we'll see. It's pretty straightforward. So here's what Shantideva has to say about this 1 out of 4 of the applications of mindfulness. He writes, the close application of mindfulness to the mind is discussed in the Ratnachyuta Sutra. Consider this. While thoroughly experiencing the mind, what are those minds that become attached or hateful or deluded? Now, so far, familiar, yeah? But now, what's the twist? Do they arise in the past, future, or present? He immediately goes ontological. Any mind that is past has vanished. Whatever is in the future has not come. Whatever arises in the present does not last. This is the Buddha speaking. Kashyapa, he's addressing one of his major disciples. Kashyapa, the mind is not found to be present inside, like inside the body or inside the head. It's not found to be present inside or outside, or both inside and outside. Now we're looking for the mind. Where is it located? Where? Kashyapa, the mind is formless, undemonstrable, you can't point to it, intangible, devoid of a basis, invisible, unknowable as an object existing in and of itself, and without any location. And now this very famous statement, Kashyapa, the mind has never been seen, is not seen, and will not be seen by any of the Buddhas. So now we know what he's talking about. Really seeing the self-existent mind. Apart from phenomena that arise from mistaken identification, how can one know the kind of process of anything that has never been seen, is not seen, and will never be seen by any of the Buddhas? Kashyapa, the mind is like an illusion, for it apprehends many kinds of events by way of unreal conceptual projections. Kashyapa, the mind is like the current of a stream, for it does not remain, but arises, passes away, and vanishes. Kashyapa, the mind is like the wind, for it goes on for a long time and moves without being able to hold it. Kashyapa, the mind is like the radiant light of a lamp, for it arises independent upon causes and conditions. Kashyapa, the mind is like the sky, for it is totally obscured by mental afflictions and derivative mental afflictions. Kashyapa, the mind is like lightning, for it instantly vanishes and does not linger. Kashyapa, because the mind produces all suffering, it is like an enemy. Kashyapa, because the mind destroys all the roots of virtue, it is like a sandcastle. Kashyapa, because the mind mistakes suffering for happiness, it's like a fishhook. Kashyapa, because the mind mistakes the identityless for an identity, It's like a dream. Kashyapa, because the mind mistakes the impure for the pure, it's like a blue bottle fly. Kashyapa, because the mind inflicts many kinds of injuries, it's like an adversary. Kashyapa, because the mind always looks for faults, it's like a predatory goblin. Kashyapa, because the mind always looks for its chance, it's like an enemy. Kashyapa, because the mind is imbued with attachment and hostility, it always vacillates. Kashyapa, because the mind robs all the roots of virtue, it is like a thief. Kashyapa, because the mind is attracted to forms, it's like the eye of a fly. Kashyapa, because the mind is attracted to sounds, it is like a battle drum. Kashyapa, the mind is attracted to smells, like a pig that likes disgusting odors. Kashyapa, the mind is attracted to taste, like a maid who eats leftovers. Kashyapa, the mind is attracted to tactile sensations, like a fly stuck in a dish of oil. Kashyapa, even though one looks for the mind everywhere, it is not to be found. Whatever is unfindable is unobservable. Whatever is unobservable does not arise in the past, or in the present, or the future. Whatever does not arise in the past, or in the future, or in the present, really transcends the three times. Whatever really transcends the three times is neither existent nor non-existent. The Arya Ratnachudra Sutra also states, by looking everywhere for the mind, one does not really see it, inside or outside, nor does one really see it both inside and outside. It is really not seen among the psychophysical aggregates, or among the elements or the sense bases. Since the mind is not really seen, asking, from what does the mind arise? One looks everywhere for the continuum of the mind, and one considers, perhaps the mind arises from the presence of an object. Further, one ponders whatever object that might be. Is it other than the mind? Or is it that very object of the mind? If the mind were different from the mind, if the object were different from the mind, then the mind would be bifurcated. On the other hand, if that very object is the mind, then how could the mind see itself? It is implausible that the mind sees the mind. Just as the blade of a sword cannot cut itself and a fingertip cannot touch itself, I think the mind is incapable of seeing itself. Just a little bit more. Son of the family, furthermore, that which moves swiftly, ever so swiftly, without remaining still, like a monkey, like the wind, like a waterfall, and like the flame of an oil lamp, travels far away. It is incorporeal, craves objects, experiences the six sense bases, and is conscious of one thing after another. A stable mind is said to be one that is still, single-pointed, not agitated, not scattered, single-pointedly quiescent, and free of distraction. And finally, I think the Arya Akshayamati Sutra states, one resolves, I shall strive to achieve this, and I shall not lose sight of this ultimate reality of the mind. What is the ultimate reality of the mind, and what is achievement? The mind is like an illusion. Devoting everything to that is called the ultimate reality of the mind. Renouncing all one's possessions and totally dedicating oneself to the purification of all the Buddha fields is called achievement. So I will give just a little bit of guidance, but there was a big surge of guidance, of inspiration. So let's please find a comfortable posture. you.